A map of Europe in May 1940, Poland had already fallen, and the world seemed frozen, awaiting the next blow. German divisions, brimming with experience and confidence, continued to advance according to a plan designed not just to defeat, but to quickly disrupt Western strategy. Against this backdrop stood the French Maginot Line, powerful and symbolic, and the perception of many French strategists. We are safe. But in the German general staff, another plan emerged, cunning, bold, and risky. It didn't destroy the Maginot Line head-on. It did what Blitzkrieg does best: bypass it. The fall of Poland demonstrated two things. Germany knew how to strike quickly and brutally, and the diplomatic guarantees of the Allies at the time were often not backed by lightning-fast ground operations. Poland was exhausted by the fighting, and by mid-September found itself caught between a rock and a hard place. The Germans in the west and Soviet units in the east. This freed the Germans for their next move, shifting the war's center of gravity westward. France and Great Britain were obliged to respond, and on paper they did so, but their readiness for a real offensive was far below the level of German resolve. At Wehrmacht headquarters, an idea emerged that would later be called the Manstein Plan, or, in English-language sources, the Sichelschnitt, sickle cut. It was no simple copy of the old Schlieffen Plan. It was a careful adaptation, based on the lessons of the First World War and the French command's over-reliance on fortifications along its own border. Instead of a direct offensive through the center of the front, the Germans decided on a diversion, a demonstrative attack on the Netherlands and Belgium, forcing significant Allied forces there, and then launching the main attack through the Ardennes, a territory the French considered impassable for a powerful mechanized force. If the strike succeeded, it would cut through the Allied forces and reach the English Channel, cutting off the British and French armies from supplies. This maneuver became the heart of the Manstein Plan. Day X, May 10, 1940, lightning in the Netherlands and Belgium. The morning of May 10, 1940, began quickly. German forces simultaneously attacked three previously neutral countries: the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Each country had its own motives for the attack. Luxembourg was a nearly symbolic gateway, the Netherlands an important flank and port bases, Belgium a window onto northern France. The Dutch came under massive bombing and air raids, and the campaign culminated in a horrific episode: the destruction of central Rotterdam on May 14th, when German aircraft obliterated the historic city center, hastening the capitulation of the Netherlands. Heavy civilian casualties and overwhelming pressure forced the Dutch government to lay down its arms. War in the air and on the roads. How the Blitzkrieg worked. Germany didn't simply attack. It utilized the synergy of tanks, motorized infantry, and aviation. Light and medium tank spearheads, supported by reconnaissance and bombing, smashed through weak defenses, closed pockets, and cut off communication lines. Where necessary, Luftwaffe aircraft bombed airfields, railways, and troop concentrations. Where necessary, artillery and engineering units quickly cleared obstacles and bridges. This wasn't just force, it was speed, and speed created panicked communication failures for the enemy. The heart of the operation, and the moment when the fate of the campaign turned, was concentrated in the Sedan area. German forces, concentrated in Army Group A, unexpectedly and with lightning speed broke through French positions on the Meuse River near Sedan in mid-May. Crossings across the Meuse were secured by massive artillery bombardment and supported by air power. Then came tank breakthroughs, which quickly widened the gap and allowed mechanized units to break into the Allied rear. This operation demonstrated how a risky maneuver through the impenetrable Ardennes could become a catalyst for strategic success. The French and British were effectively cut off from their supply lines. The battle for Sedan from May 12th to 17th became the very junction through which the Germans' victorious tide passed. French operational planning prior to the attack relied on the Dial Plan, countermeasures envisioned in advance of Allied forces into Belgium to meet the expected main German attack there. In fact, the French command expected precisely this extensive approach through Belgium and prepared accordingly. But the maneuver through the Ardennes proved unexpected and fatal. The Allied forces found themselves trapped, cut off from their bases and supplies by the Germans. There were attempts at counterattacks. For example, local counterattacks by armored units, such as near Arras, where a British corps attempted to dislodge the Germans from the salient. However, they were unable to muster sufficient forces in the right place at the right time. Technical and organizational problems, the delay of reserves, and difficulties in coordinating between the British and French headquarters all played a role. When German motorized units broke through the defenses and turned north, their formations rushed toward the English Channel. The result was the rapid compression of the Allied armies into a narrow coastal strip near Dunkirk. For the British, this was a catastrophe. Thousands of soldiers of the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, and the remnants of French divisions were at risk of being destroyed or captured. In this critical situation, the British government and naval command launched an emergency evacuation operation, Operation Dynamo. From May 26 to June 4th, with the help of warships and hundreds of civilian small craft, hundreds of thousands of soldiers were successfully evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk. This evacuation, despite the loss of equipment and materiel, saved the core of the British Army and gave Britain a chance to continue the war. The result, approximately 338,000 British, French, and Belgian soldiers were saved. The price of time. The Germans faced a choice: continue the destruction of troops at Dunkirk, risking a loss of momentum and giving the Anglo-French forces time to begin reorganizing, or give them a respite and focus on pressing further toward Paris and the south. In several cases, decisions in the German High Command, short-term halts of mechanized units, gave the British a window for evacuation. Why this happened is still a subject of debate among historians. A combination of logistical constraints, a desire to consolidate the rear, and the German command's underestimation of the evacuation's pace. The simple side effect of saving hundreds of thousands of soldiers became a near-decisive factor for Britain's future resistance. While the Allies were finishing their sieve-like defenses, the Germans advanced. By mid-June, German troops were already at the gates of Paris. On June 14, 1940, German units entered the capital, a city where the thought of death had seemed unthinkable just a few weeks earlier. The French government, in high command, seeing no chance of a successful, peaceful continuation of the war, sent delegations for negotiations. On June 22, 1940, the Armistice of Compiègne was signed. The country was divided. The northern and western parts were occupied by the Germans, while a puppet Vichy government was established in the south. In a matter of weeks, thanks to a combination of strategic German maneuvering and Allied mistakes and failures in preparation and reaction, the old European order was abruptly destroyed. Germany's victory in 1940 came at a high price, not only in losses, but also in political impact. For the Germans, it was proof of the correctness of the Blitzkrieg concept. Concentrate the attack at the right point, break through the defenses, and advance into the enemy's rear. For the Allies, it was a painful lesson that static fortifications, Maginot, and outdated plans are insufficient against a flexible and mobile threat. For ordinary people, it meant destroyed cities, remember Rotterdam, refugees, captivity, and the beginning of a new, harsh occupation regime in the occupied territories. Why the Allied defense failed. Allied mistakes in detail. Strategic calculations. The French command was confident in the immutability of the main directions, and therefore prepared its forces according to a single plan, the Maginot Line and the entrance to Belgium. This left them vulnerable to unexpected maneuvers. Communication and coordination. The British and French failed to quickly and clearly coordinate maneuvers, especially when it came to deploying reserves and transmitting orders. Tactical decisions, disjointed counterattacks, and local successes failed to form a strong, united front, and time was working against the army, which was losing momentum. Logistics and supply. The Germans, although they acted quickly, could afford to move along a dense road network and reinforce themselves at the expense of terrain. In Western Europe, the infrastructure was such that a motorized army could maintain momentum, unlike in the Polish campaign a year earlier and on the day of the defense of France. The victory of 1940 didn't end the war, but it completely changed its character. Britain remained alone on the mainland, while Germany gained control of most of Europe and the prospect of further expansion. The victory also gave Hitler confidence and a false illusion of invulnerability, which subsequently affected their plans against the USSR. For the Allies, the lesson was clear. They needed to rethink their strategy, mobilize their industry, and change their approach to war, offensive and mobile, as the Germans had done.